Hello, everyone. Here we are again for our IFSCA live with a new time. So we're starting an hour later now, which is going to be our new schedule. And we're going to do things a little bit differently. Starting from now on, I'm going to use the first 10 minutes to talk about a specific topic, as we have done before. And then we're going to open up for questions if anyone is live with us and has questions to ask. So, as usual, feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat. This is fun if it's interactive, if it's a conversation that we are having. Mel is not going to be able to be with me for a few weeks, so it's going to be just us. But I know it'll be fun. So the thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is something simple, which is the basic assumptions that we have in the IFS model. And this is very basic, but it's always worthwhile to revisit them. So we have 6 basic assumptions. And the number one basic assumption is we are made up of parts. We have these subpersonalities that are parts of us. Our minds are multiple. So if you've taken any IFS course, that's something that you've heard already. But the implications of that are very important because there are some modalities that don't see us as being multiple in that way. And so they don't become as they're working relational with parts, which is fundamental in the IFS model and the way that we do this type of work. But I think IFS is tapping into something that's fundamentally real. When we talk about parts, I don't think it's just language, which a lot of people see that way. They think, oh, it's just language. It's a way of talking about our minds or our psyche. But I believe that in a couple of decades, we will actually have scientific evidence that gives us more of an explanation of what parts are and how they are constituted in our systems. So if you look at the work of developmental biologists, especially the folks in Tufts University, Michael Levin, and the type of research that you're doing right now, the assumptions are very much the same, and they're getting wonderful results with those assumptions. That basically we're made up of parts, and these parts, they come together, and as they come together, the sum of them is greater than adding each part together. So there's something special that happens when all parts come together. And so if the way that we understand scientifically what we are nowadays is atoms, they come together, molecules, and they come together in larger blocks, and we have proteins, and we have amino acids, and we have a whole bunch of stuff that together eventually forms little organisms or cells. Cells come together to form tissues, organs, and whole systems that for some reason have a homeostasis, have an identity or a unity that it tries to preserve. So literally, we are made up of parts, right? We have parts in our bodies. We can split our bodies into different parts, but also our psyche has different parts, and we can talk to them, and we know that from our experience in IFS. So once we understand that these things are real, it's actually tracking onto something that's ontologically true, that is there, then the way that you start relating to these parts becomes different, right? It's not just language. I'm not just talking about parts, and it's just a convenient way of naming things. It's like I'm actually feeling for what happened to them, and I'm developing compassion, and then understanding that they are real and they're suffering there. It is essential that we go towards them so that we can help them, because our go-to way of dealing with difficult things in our lives is let's just not look at it, right? Let's forget about it. Let's think about something else. Let's distract, and everything will be okay. But once we understand that this pushing away doesn't solve the problem, actually just leaves parts of us with the suffering alone by themselves, then compassion comes, right? And then a change in our hearts comes and says, okay, I actually better go take care of these parts of me that are suffering. Just ignoring them, avoiding them is not enough. So that's assumption number one. We're made up of parts. And by the way, if you joined a little bit later, feel free to post questions and comments in the chat, and I'll answer them in a little bit once I'm done with this part. Number two is everyone has a self. So this is something that is hard to prove, right? Because you just need one person not to have self to prove that assumption false. And yet, over and over and over, as we work with clients, what happens is over time, more and more and more of their self energy shows up and becomes available. Also, when we invite parts to look into themselves and tell us what they see, if they keep going, at some point they find self. Even unattached burdens, when they look inside, there is some goodness in them, so they can find self. So everyone has self, and that is an important assumption to get clear about, because if the person sitting across from me has self, then my job is to bring that forth somehow, invite that to be here more, create space for it so that it can shine forth and be available to take care of the parts. With some clients, it could be a while until their self energy becomes super evident for them. Hopefully for us, it'll be a little bit easier to see, right? Usually my first meetings with a client, even if the client is in a lot of distress, as they're talking about it, sometimes I'm noticing, oh, wow, there's a lot of clarity here. There's a lot of information that this client can go and get, right? And so, yes, you're in distress and you're able to notice all of this. You're able to know all of that, right? Oh, and there's some courage here, right? That you're facing this, you're taking care of this. You're not just simply avoiding it altogether. So understanding that assumption to be true, that all of us have self, then we can look for what aspects of self energy are available in the client so that we can use that as the beginning, where we start with, right? So we can highlight that and then invite other qualities of self to be present for the client. The third assumption is that the parts are forced into roles because of trauma, attachment injuries, wounding, bad stuff that happened in life. So when some difficult event happens in life, and on top of it being difficult, there is no container to help with it. There's no one to witness you and hold you and help you feel like it's okay. Something big just happened and you're okay. If that doesn't get to happen, then parts will have to deal with the situation, right? Usually it means you did not have enough self-energy in the moment to take care of it. And so your parts are going to have to find strategies to deal with it. The exile is going to take on the beliefs, energies, emotions related to that difficult moment, and are going to hold that. And then the protectors are going to find ways of pushing it away and keeping it there and avoiding it from surfacing again. So it's the wound and the inability to integrate that and make sense of that and find a good solution to that makes parts have to deal with it somehow and find a temporary solution that's not ideal, but it's the best that they can do in the moment, the best that we can do in that moment. And so because these parts, they are forced into that, right? So exiles, they take on burdens, and protectors, they take on roles to protect the system. Once we get to know them, the good news is we can clear the burdens. And when we do that, the protectors, they can soften or even give up the roles that they have altogether. However, for these parts, as they live that, they sometimes live with it for so long that they believe that the burden is what they are. The role is what they are. And so this entangling those things, making a distinction, you are not your burden. You are not your role. You will still exist. You will still be a part of the system, and you can still be useful if you're a protector. You can be useful in other ways. It can be really helpful for these parts. So that's a little bit of orienting that we can do for them. The fourth assumption is when parts, they are not in their extreme roles, or the behaviors that are not extreme, actually they always have a good intention behind them, right? So whatever a part is doing, the behavior can be harmful, but if you look at the intention, it'll be good. It'll be trying to do something helpful and good for the system. And that's why we say that all parts, that there are no bad parts. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that parts will not do anything harmful. Actually, parts do a lot of very harmful things. They cause harm to the body, to relationships, and to other people. They might destroy objects and things in the world. They can even sometimes increase or even cause some illness. So the consequences are not good, but the intentions are, and that's what it means. So when we say all parts are welcome here and there are no bad parts, it doesn't mean that, however your parts show up, if they're very destructive, oh, it's okay because all parts are welcome. It's not that. It's that there's a good intention behind them, right? And we should remember that when we're talking to them, because when we do and we keep that honor and respect that they have a good intention, once we develop a relationship with them, then they can look at what they're doing and say, oh yeah, this is not working. I don't even like doing this. I'm tired of doing it. And if there's another way, sure, I would love to do it differently. Great Meatball is saying, yeah, you are not your burden is basically the same as you don't need to identify yourself with something that's wrong. Well, yes, because because of the trauma and the wounds that we experience, we feel the badness or the shamefulness of doing something harmful or doing something that is destructive or whatever. And so we come to the conclusion that all of what we are, is bad, right? That's one of the ways that we take on shame. And to be able to make that distinction between like, this behavior is not good, my intention is good, and there's something that I can do about this, and what I essentially am is not that. Oh, so I'm not bad, I'm not shameful, I'm a good person, I'm good. That is huge for systems that have experienced trauma. The fifth assumption is that as we develop, our parts, they get together and they form either clusters and alliances or polarization. So they form all sorts of relationships within our systems, right? So you will have parts that are together, and that one part makes another part come into something. And then as those parts do something, this one that doesn't like it comes and does something else. And so now they're in a struggle. And then you might have these parts that do something, and then these parts that have an opinion about it, that are around it. So we have multiple complex relationships in our systems. And this is my current understanding. That is also how we understand attachment, because if you look at each part, you will see that they have a way of relating to themselves. They have a way of relating to other parts. They have a way of relating to the client's self or to our self energy. They have a way of relating to others. When you start putting them together, they get into clusters that the cluster has a general way of relating to itself, to others, etc. And then you might have clusters that are actually opposite in the way that they relate. So, for example, you might have a cluster that has a wounded part that has been abandoned, and then that has protectors that say, never again will I experience that thing of being abandoned. I don't need anyone. I would rather be alone than be abandoned again. The pain is just too much. And then there's this other cluster of this part that feels alone because it was abandoned, but that feels alone, and the aloneness is the center, right? And then there are parts that say, I'm going to find someone. I'm going to be really nice to them. Oh, I'm going to be what they want me to be, so that they don't leave me and they stay with me forever. And so this cluster meets someone, starts a relationship, gets really close. When things are getting very, very intimate, this cluster goes like, oh my God, no. Move away, takes over, pushes away. There's a push and a pull, right? So that can happen. So parts have complex relationships, and these complex relationships will translate into how we relate to ourselves and to others and to the universe in general. Smeekness said, I have never met a part in myself or someone else that I didn't fall in love with once I got to know it enough. They're also wonderful at their core. Yes. Yeah. And that's something for us to remember, right? Because when we first meet a part, the way it presents, it might be very rough, angry, whatever. But once we get to know them, we fall in love for them. It's funny. There was a session with a client of mine, and they said, "Oh, client, we haven't spoken to that part of you in a while. I just missed that part." And the client was like, "What? You missed a part of me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I like your parts. I have as I get to know them, I develop, a relationship with them, and so I come to like them." So yes, all parts are really beautiful and wonderful, and they all have self energy at their essence, right? They have self energy, um, and so sometimes as you start to relate to a part, you see there's a lot of wisdom and beauty that comes with it. The more the part becomes integrated, the more that becomes available, and that's because they have self energy. A part that is not burdened or has taken a role because of a burden, it just naturally lives bathed in self energy. And then the last final assumption is that change in the internal world will have an impact on the external world and vice versa. So this is a little bit of a complex assumption, but it means multiple things. Number one is there are many models that they try to focus on making changes. And in IFS, there's a lot of change that happens because we unburden the part, and then a new possibility becomes available. So there's a lot of change that doesn't actually need effort or a lot of intentionality for it to be different. That's not to say that once you unburden, then it's great, all done, beautiful. Because there are some folks that once they unburden a part, now there's a new possibility. For example, I had a lot of social anxiety. I unburdened those parts that held that, and now I feel a little bit more confident and courageous to go out into the world and interact with people. But I don't know how to do it because I've always avoided it. So there is a learning curve, right? So even if the burden has been lifted, has been unloaded, it could be that other parts that negotiate that kind of interaction with the world need to slowly learn how to do something that they didn't do before. Also, connected to this, sometimes we will say, change in the internal world doesn't have to mean necessarily that you have to do something in the external world. So this is different, right? So let's say we're working with sexual abuse, and we go in and we get to know a part that tells us the story of what happened. Us finding out what happened, if before there was dissociation and amnesia and there was no recollection of who did it and how it happened, and now we learn how and who, and that person is still in our lives, it doesn't mean that we have to go and confront the person. We can make a self-led decision. We can listen to all parts that say something for saying something and have an opinion about not saying anything, and we can listen to all of them and make a self-led decision. So if we get to know parts of us, that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to apply it in the external world. That being said, one thing usually translates to another. It's just that we're not forced to behave externally in a specific way. And the opposite is also true. Changes in the external world will impact what's happening with our parts. So sometimes we are working with a client and we're doing good work, we're processing stuff, we're getting to know parts and burdening them, etc. And then all of a sudden something happens in the external world. They lose a job, there's a breakup, something else happens. So there will be an impact in the internal world. And it could be that the work that we've been doing so thus far, we'll have to pause for a while so that we can take care of what's happening here, because there's a new configuration inside with these external circumstances. So Great Meatball says, don't know if I can ask this here, but don't you think that these issues can't be solved by talk therapy or intelligence in general? Can you say more about what you mean with these issues? Um, if you're talking about the burdens that we took on, I actually believe that it's possible to have ways of unburdening that are not through IFS. I think it's possible. I've experienced unburdenings through movement and dance, through someone being really attuned to me and just meeting my needs in such a way that's so satisfying. That's exactly what I needed. That something shifts. And other modalities also can be pretty good at that. I've also seen a lot of people getting better, but because they've developed a bunch of resources and they haven't really unburdened the parts. And so what I see in those cases is once a big thing happens in their lives, they go back to the constricted way of being from before, because the burden has not been unloaded. So there is something special with IFS. And what I believe is special with IFS is a very clear way of disentangling stuff that got entangled in the trauma or the bad experience that they had, right? So for example, if it's sexual abuse and there is touch and there is arousal, you are entangling feeling aroused, which is a natural good thing in your system, in your body, with your boundaries being crossed, you being abused. So you entangle those two things, and so going forward, every time touch happens, your protectors are going to do something to avoid abuse from happening. So IFS has a way of disentangling it so clearly that you can then again get the touch and the abuse doesn't come, right? So that's what's wonderful about IFS, this separation of these things that got entangled in the bad experience. And then once that separation of the burden and the part happens, the reintegration of the part into the system, right? And the part's self energy being available again. Great Meatball says the issues of internal system parts, the relationships, burdens, trauma. I've been disillusioned with therapy these several years. I don't know if the very system of civilization that has created these wounds can also heal them. Yeah. You're pointing to something important here, Great Meatball, and it is that as much as we try to heal and develop systems of healing, we are still developing a lot of these systems within the paradigms and the framework of a society that in many ways is not healthy, right? We look at the way that we live our lives so isolated from each other. It's not ideal. What we prioritize is not our health, is not our happiness most of the time. So I can definitely see what you're saying there. And also, therapy can be a long process. It could be years. It's complex because what happened to us is complex. And so sometimes we get hopeful with something new and we think 2-3 sessions of this new magical thing will make me feel better. And then we feel a little bit better, but then there's a whole bunch of stuff that we still haven't taken care of. And so, yes, we can get disillusioned with it if we create expectations that I'm going to have a few sessions and I'm going to just live happily ever after. The what I experience, just talking to people in general in life, is most people are not happy. Most people are just getting by somehow, and they have moments of happiness, but it's hard to find people that are satisfied and happy and enjoy a really good life. So there's definitely something for us to change and improve. And I think the first one that I've changed in my life that I think we're missing, especially in the Western world, is community. We've lost the wisdom of how to be in community, how to support each other in community. I think that's a good first step, right? Having a place that feels safe and a group of people that it can come back to on a regular basis and know if anything happens to me, they will be there. So for me, in my case, it's my community from biodanza, the Zen community, my soccer groups, my families, the therapeutic communities that I'm a part of. But this is a big question that you're raising here. So, Great Meatball, I don't know if what I'm saying goes in the direction of what you're saying, but feel free to make other comments if you want to. And if anyone else has any questions or any comments or anything that they want to say, you're welcome to say that. So just to close here, right? So we were talking about the assumptions, just repeating the 6 basic assumptions. So we all have parts. Everyone has self. Parts, they are forced into their roles because of trauma, attachment, injuries, wounds, bad stuff that happened. Parts have a good intention, even if their behavior is harmful. Our parts form complex relationships with each other, alliances, polarizations, and then changes in the internal world will affect changes in the external system and vice versa. As Meekness says, I have found a lot of communities are still struggling with how to move through ruptures. Yes, yeah. They're all well-intentioned people, but many haven't worked out how to safely hold a community together when ruptures and polarizations happen. Yeah. So, Smeetness, I think that ruptures, they are a natural part, and I think it just goes with the territory that that will happen. However, I think if we can live together and if our lives are implicated, then it's easier to get through those moments. So these communities that it's very easy for us to just say, I'm going to quit this one and I'm going to join that one. It's easy for ruptures to happen because that's an easy way out. And sometimes it's the healthy thing to do, to just leave a community, because you try very hard to be there, to speak for what you need, set the clear boundaries, be loving, whatever. And still sometimes it's harmful for you to be there. But if you live together, meaning if you dance together, if you eat together, if you do stuff together, basically, if you live life, if you share life in a way, then it becomes easier to overcome the ruptures when they happen. That being said, I think there is a lot for all of us to learn about just apologizing and saying, I'm sorry about that, and owning our mistakes. It's hard. And I think that in the IFS world, we don't talk enough about making self-led apologies and the importance of that for other people. And I myself have struggled with this too in some relationships, especially when someone says something that parts of me hear as like, oh, that's not true what you're saying, right? And still, if I value the relationship, there's something here that needs to be done. And then he said ruptures and polarizations. Polarizations, I think, are even more complex, because then when you get into polarizations and you have groups that are fighting for power and struggling, then things are really bad. A Great Meatball said, what you say is very true, but what if we, as a system, cannot be satisfied or happy? What if we're supposed to suffer in this sixth civilization? What if we are supposed to suffer? So I'm going to bring an argument from Plato, the philosopher, the Greek philosopher. And Plato used to say, we cannot argue with anyone and win the argument to prove that there is such a thing as feeling happy and feeling content and satisfied. You have to experience it. And then once you experience it, then you can know, okay, this is available, and that other option is also available, and I prefer this. So I don't think that we are supposed to suffer in this sixth civilization. I think that there are many things that we can do and we can start doing to make our lives better, healthier, happier, easier for us. But it requires thinking about our internal system, taking good care of it, but also thinking about the larger systems that we create, right? Being intentional about it. So in this system, what am I focusing on? Am I just focusing on the tasks that we have and with the things that we have to do, and I forget completely about relationships? I forget completely about the culture that we are developing here together? Or do I just focus on the relationships that we have here and I forget about accomplishing anything, right? Or I just care about the culture. Let's make sure that there's a lot of harmony here, right? To the detriment of people's development and deepening of relationships in this community. So what I would say is I've experienced many communities that are happy and healthy, moments and periods in life that are good, and I think there is a way for us to focus on that and say, this is what I want, and go for more of that and less of what's not good. And I think that as we get to know our systems and we unburden them, then more and more we start to say, no, this is not really what I want. This is not really what satisfies me. So Great Meatball says both options can be available in theory, but we should probably know that we won't ever completely escape the overall curse of our world. Well, Great Meatball, what I would invite you to do is just do a U-turn right now if you can, and get to know that part of you that says we cannot escape the overall curse of our world. Okay, so just see where that part is in or around your body. And then once you are with that part, just check how you're feeling towards it, making sure that your communication is direct. If other parts are around, see if they can give you a space. And then ask that part what it's afraid would happen if it didn't hold that belief that we cannot escape the curse. It could be that this is a protector that is holding that notion for some reason. A lot of parts that show up like that, what is the case for them is they've seen parts in the system hope. Oh, now it's gonna be good. Now I'm gonna be happy. Now I can trust this person. Now this therapy is gonna work for me. And then when your hopes are dashed, the pain of the disillusion is so great that a part comes and says, I won't hope ever again. It's too painful to hope and then to have my hopes dashed. So look into that, because it could just be a protector. Yeah. All right. Any other comments or anything else for today? Thank you for the conversation. It's always great when you all participate. It's nice to have a conversation. All right. So I think we are feeling complete for today. Thank you all for participating. Margaret Vey said, what if you do not have a community? You can build one. You can start one, and you know, 3 people can be the beginning of a community. What is important to you? If you had a community, what would you like it to center around? What is meaningful to you that you would like to be in community with other people about? Great Meatball says, thank you. I appreciate the invitation for a U-turn. Okay. Yeah. Invitations for U-turns don't always go well. Sometimes it's like, well, you're not hearing my point, and you're just telling me that I have to turn inwards. But I think both are true, right? So the part can have a point. It can be a valid point, and we can still do the U-turn and say, how come you're holding that? Okay, Margaret Vey, if IFS is something that you want to have community about, I don't know if you're a Stepping Stones graduate, but in our Stepping Stones, we have the community cafes. We have meetings that Mel holds where we just get together and we talk about how we're doing. That's us with community. We have the YouTube, the lives that we're doing every week on Monday here, that we can come together and build community. But you can also invite other people to practice with you. You can have like a peer practice group. There are ways of developing connections and having a support network. It's so important to have not only the inner attachment figure that self is, as something that you can rely on, but also to have a group that can become an attachment figure for you, right? A group that you can learn how to have a secure relationship with, that you can depend on them if things become difficult in life. So that's my invitation to you. All right. Thank you, everyone. I will see you again next Monday at our new time, which is an hour later. And if you have questions, you can go to our website and send us the questions. You can send me an email, and I will type in the chat my email. You can send that to me as well. Oh, look, I'm logged into Derek's account, so it's going to look like it's Derek typing, but it's me. So you can send me an email with questions there, and I'm going to answer it next time. All right. Have a good one. Have a good week. Bye-bye.